You may be thinking, I ran the numbers and I should be fine. But what if the math you're relying on isn't telling the whole story? Today, we're going to talk about some of the most common examples of fuzzy retirement math so you can spot them before they cause you real problems.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Welcome into this edition of the podcast. It is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry and myself, Liz, the founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors. And we're going to get a little fuzzy this week, Liz, so we'll see how that goes.
That makes me think of Sesame Street.
Oh, yeah.
Fuzzy.
Yeah. Cookie Monster and all those guys. Snuffleupagus, definitely very, very fuzzy. So yeah, good stuff indeed. Well, we're thinking about, as in general, I think people sometimes, we do back of the napkin stuff, right? Hey, let me quick do this math and blah, blah, blah. And that should work, or that should get me in the ballpark, right? So we've got some common examples. We got 5 I want to run through, or you want to run through really, and kind of give us, this fuzzy math idea, and then maybe some like what to do kind of best practices kind of thing with that. So let's just dive in and talk about some fuzzy math here. So first one. The mutual funds that I'm invested in have averaged about 7% annual growth for the last 5 years, and I'm pretty happy with that moving forward. I think that fuzzy math, Liz, jumps out at you as, well, as long as everything stays perfect, I guess you'll be okay, but how often in life does that go that way?
Right. And when I think of this, the annual growth for 5 years, well, that's a whole lot different than a long-term retirement.
Right.
And it could or couldn't, it may or may not be the same average over the next 30 years because we're talking about an entirely different time period. A lot of things could be different. The other thing is you're moving from accumulation to decumulation.
Mm-hmm.
And that 7% average return could be something that's a little volatile. Maybe you're not really looking at it because you're accumulating. Well, when you begin to draw down, you begin to pull money out. It's a lot more important that you're paying attention to the sequence of returns, not just the average return. So you want to make sure that you're relying on something that is going to be appropriate for retirement so that you're not going to be drawing down in periods of time where that, the market is down.
Yeah.
You can have 2 people that have the same average, and one is going to run out of money because they're hitting it at the wrong times and they're drawing down. So they're, instead of dollar cost averaging, they're dollar cost ravaging their retirement.
Yeah, it's kind
portfolio.
of cannibalizing itself a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want to really look at in retirement, instead of just thinking about an average that you might have earned when you were working and adding to the pot, you want to think about what's that average return you're going to get for your short-term bucket that you're going to use in the first 5 years of retirement, your midterm bucket, and then that long-term bucket, and make sure that those are lined up appropriately.
Well, and it says mutual funds too, right? I mean, there's,
right.
So those can be very volatile too. And then that's just one component as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot to think about with mutual funds because they can drift from what they have done in the past.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's other issues there that we could talk about, go down a whole rabbit trail.
And you can apply that, to really anything. But I think if you even applied that to your portfolio across the board and just said, as long as, we hear that often, right? As long as I keep getting 10% a year, I'm going to be fine. When it's like, well, right. That just, you're banking on if everything goes perfect, kind of how I started this conversation, and life just never works out that way. So
an average is sometimes you're above the average and sometimes you're below the average, and you always come back to that mean.
Reversion to the mean,
over
right?
time. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so you may be looking at a period of time that has been above the average, and there may be a period of time below the average ahead of you. And you've got to think about those things, the risk management of that when you're entering retirement.
And I guess that's when you start asking yourself, do we enjoy ourselves more on the good years and we peel it back on the bad years? And I don't think you want to do that in retirement. You want to kind of have consistency there. So
right. You've got to think more long-term than that.
Yeah. Okay. That's the first one. Second one, well, I'll just live off the dividends and never touch the principal. Once upon a time, you probably could do this. Is this even viable anymore?
I don't know if people could or couldn't in the past, although, maybe our lifestyle living cost is
Okay.
higher than it was.
Fair.
But when you think about what people are going to be pulling from their investments, you say, how much are you going to need? A lot of people think, oh, I'll need 4% because that's that safe withdrawal rate that people hear about. But the
Right.
average dividend yield of the S&P 500 is usually around 2%. Right now, it's much lower. It's more like 1.25% as the average yield on the S&P 500. There are pockets that have a higher yield. So the top 80 highest dividend companies in the S&P 500 are paying about 4.7% average. Maybe that's enough,
Sure.
but, that would really mean, well, I've got all my eggs in this basket of these top 80 that are paying the highest yield, or you're looking to get even higher yielding investments that might be a little more risky because the higher the yield, typically the higher the risk that you're going to potentially have in that underlying investment. So I think when you're in retirement, you really want to take a stable dividend approach. That could mean a lower dividend yield in some areas in order to have that stable dividend approach. So when you do that, you're not going to be necessarily hitting this percentage that's going to allow you to cover all of your expenses and not ever need to dip into any of the principal there. So you'd have to be able to live on a lower payout rate. And you would need some cushion just in case companies cut their dividends.
Right.
You never know. They could run into time periods where they can't pay out as much of a dividend as they have paid out. And when that happens, typically the stock price drops or the investment value drops. So then you wouldn't be able to just quickly sell it and put it into something else. So you want to make sure that you're thinking through the risk of that as well, and you have some cushion so that if things change over time, you've got that cushion there. And then on top of that, you've got to think about inflation.
Well,
And
yeah.
how are you going to keep up with inflation?
Yeah. I mean, and we certainly have been reminded of that, recently. And I mean, obviously, even, we kind of still feel like even though the numbers are better, we're still feeling the lasting ramifications of that. So it's easy.
And my to-do on this, when telling people what to think, when you're thinking about what are you going to do about living off the dividends, not touching principal, you've got to think about your total return. What is the total return on your portfolio, not just your dividend income, what is also the growth so that you can support your income needs year after year and have the growth you need to keep up with inflation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the fuzzy math here is also kind of blurring into the retirement myths, I think, as well.
Right.
Like these next couple of ones, for example. We often kind of, maybe once upon a time these were accurate, but I just don't think they are anymore. So like I'll spend less in retirement because, I'm not commuting any longer and, buying the work clothes and going out to lunch or going downstairs in the office building to the cafe downstairs every day. That kind of myth also kind of leads to that fuzzy math of, well, I'm just going to spend less in retirement. But most people typically, at least early on, probably spend more because they're, active.
Right. And I think our retirees today, we are all a lot more active than retirees of earlier generations and want to be a lot more active. So we're going to, like you say, we're going to have these new expenses that are replacing the old expenses. It includes the hobbies and the travel and updating the home. But we also need to pick up our health insurance that may have been covered by our workplace. And that can be a pretty significant cost in retirement. Some people want to make gifts to family and do some fun things like that. So you've got to look at what your expenses could be. What are the needs? Then also, what do you want? What would you like to have that might be even over and above that dream type, things? And then what do you wish to have at the end? And when you're thinking about the spending, it's better to overestimate than underestimate and find out down the road that you're ahead of plan rather than falling behind where you thought you would be after you've already retired. So I see most people's spending in retirement is the same or a little higher at first.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. I mean, maybe even later, because then you're going to swap out, the activities for the more and more medical. So, you know.
A lot depends on what happens with your health.
Yeah, and everybody's going to be different. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And again, the same thing with number 4 here. It kind of blurs into those old school retirement myths. I'm not worried about taxes in retirement because I'll be in that lower tax bracket anyway. And I've joked for years, Liz, with this one. It's like, sometimes I feel like we kind of got put into this category of we think that just like when we get to retire Social Security, we get Social Security, right? We hit that age that we automatically get put into this, lower bracket in taxes as a senior. And it's like, well, that'd be great if they did that, but it's not guaranteed. Now, if you strategize and plan, maybe you could be in a lower tax bracket, but that's not guaranteed. Most people typically stay in the same tax bracket.
Most people do because they're still spending the same amount of money.
Exactly.
So they need to pull the same.
Yep.
Lifestyle's the same. And so even if they're not getting that much coming into the house from Social Security and pensions, they're going to be pulling it from their retirement assets. There may be a gap period of time, those first few years, where it's a lot lower tax bracket, but then they're going to hit that required minimum distribution period. Going forward, it's usually going to be as high as or higher than when they were working. On top of that, it's going to impact their cost of their health care with the IRMA surtax. And we have some other funny things that happen, the Social Security torpedo that
Right.
people don't expect at all, just taking in $1 of income, if you're in that, say, 22% tax bracket, could mean you're paying tax on $1.85 more because it's pulling some of that Social Security income along with it on the tax return. And that is a surprise. We also have the widow's tax that can be a real surprise to a lot of people when I talk to them. So all of these things create higher taxes in maybe not every year, but in different pockets of years. And so you've got to do forward-looking tax planning starting now to make sure you're taking advantage of every opportunity when you can. And while you can, you don't leave any of that behind.
Right.
Otherwise, you will overpay in the end.
We
end up overpaying.
We've been hearing a lot of conversations from different states right now. A big push is talking about maybe, getting rid of this whole, property tax for seniors. Once you've paid off your house, I know Florida's been talking about it a lot, a couple other states. Once you've paid off your home, you shouldn't have to pay that annual property tax, which is awesome, right? And it's kind of one of those things where we think, maybe we should have like this trifecta of things that seniors get when they get to a certain point. You activate Social Security and you don't have to pay property tax anymore on your home once it's paid off, and you automatically get put in a lower tax bracket when you turn 65. That'd be awesome, but it doesn't exist yet, right?
No, because that's going to be a big chunk of our society is going to be in that age group,
right?
And
Yep.
then where are the states? Where's the government going to get the money from?
Right.
If
and that's the problem, right?
Yeah, that becomes a big problem. Here in Texas, our property tax does freeze at age 65. I'm not familiar with all the other states, of course, and how their property taxes work, but it is a huge benefit. And it would be nice if there was something more like that where at least it didn't continue to go up
Right.
in all
Correct.
of these areas.
Yeah.
But I don't see how they could totally eliminate taxes on the whole senior population and
Well, and it depends on the generation too, right? I mean, so obviously the boomer generation is much larger than my generation X. We're the smallest, right? So you could say, well, it'd certainly be easy to do for Gen Xers once they get to that point, but for the boomer generation, obviously it'd be a little tougher. But anyway, we kind of got off on
depends
a
on
little
how
tangent
many
there.
people come behind you.
Yeah. But it just the idea, I think, again, it's
Yes.
this older myth that we're just be in that lower bracket, and it'd be nice if we were, but it does require planning and strategizing to stay or be in a lower bracket. It's not going to just happen naturally. So, again, it's all part of having that strategy and that plan. So the last one, fifth one here on our fuzzy math conversation, again, kind of falls into that same kind of myth category where it's best to wait until you're 70 to turn on Social Security, max it out, right, and get that biggest payment possible.
Yeah, and I know that part of this thinking comes from everything that's in the news and on the internet about people making the mistake of not getting that increased age 70. And there's this whole push in the media, I would say, to focus on wait to age 70. And I personally think it's because there are so many people that don't have enough income that haven't saved anything. When you think about the numbers that we've looked at, there's a lot of people that haven't saved enough. And so if somebody is in that situation where they don't really have a cushion of retirement savings for whatever reason, then yes, to get the biggest monthly amount is going to be good for that person in the long term. But for other people, the biggest monthly amount and the best monthly amount could be two different things. We could have a situation where one spouse didn't work. Well, when the spouse who did work files, the spouse who didn't work has access to benefits. So they've just suddenly increased their household benefit income. Need to look at that and determine, well, what is the best time to start Social Security for our situation so that we get the most over our lifetime. We could have some people that have saved a lot of money. So a lot of people that I'm working with they don't need the Social Security because they've saved very well. They've been able to save a lot of money for retirement and they could live off of the money that they've saved. But if they go ahead and turn on their Social Security, they can let their own savings grow, and they can even let their own savings grow at a higher rate. That long-term bucket could grow at a higher rate than what that Social Security is going to increase by. And again, put themselves in a better position because they get to leave what they have saved to their family. There's nothing to leave to family from Social Security. So
right.
Just kind of thinking about all of the different pieces of your retirement plan, all of the goals that you have, and which one of these are better to use for me, better to use for, legacy goals, that can shift the answer in this. So you've got to look at your own situation and optimize for yourself, not just based on a Social Security number.
Yeah, and I think across the board, Liz, I mean, that's where, again, the fuzzy math, the back of the napkin, whatever you want to call it, gets people into trouble. And there's nothing wrong with kind of putting something together for like a quick outline, to saying, okay, you're chatting with your loved one. You're like, hey, if we have this, we do this, blah, blah, blah. But then run those numbers, right? And then get the details together and then form that plan so that you can retire on your best path versus just guessing.
Is absolutely right. Because you're not an average person. So you shouldn't base your retirement assumptions on averages and rules of thumb. You need to base it on your own situation, the math that fits your unique situation. So as you say, you can be on your best path in your retirement.
Yeah, it's easy to do, right? I mean, we all know that we're going to get affected by these same things. We're all going to have taxation and Social Security and healthcare, blah, blah, blah. And they're all universalisms. I'm not sure if that's a word, but we're going to say it. They're all universalisms that affect us all. But how it plays into everybody's situation is different from person to person. What you need, Liz, is different than what I need, and so on and so forth. So get yourself onto the calendar, have a conversation if you need some help so you don't have fuzzy math getting in your way, and talk with Liz at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or whatever podcasting app you enjoy using. You can type in retire on your best path into the search box of most of those apps and find it that way, or just find it at her website, bestpathadvisors.com, where you can also click on a lot of other good tools, tips, and resources. Check out our YouTube channel and much more. So thank you for your time as always. We appreciate it. Liz, have a great week. I'll see you next time.
You too. Thank you.
Catch you later here on Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whittaberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.